Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, June 1st. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. COVID cases are back up, and that means masks are back on. In the South Bay Union School District, an uptick in illnesses prompted the superintendent to bring back a mask mandate indoors and out. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has the details.
This is an early dismissal day at Robb Elementary School in San Isidro. That means time to buy some Takis and head home for the afternoon. Oscar Guerrero is here to pick up his younger brother. You'll notice he's wearing a mask outdoors.
I feel more safe to not get the virus. Yeah, and it's better for the kids, you know, so they don't get sick and don't come to school and lose more days to learn.
There are just a handful of days left before summer break in the South Bay Union School District, which is now requiring face masks for its 12 schools and more than 6,000 students from preschool to 8th grade. Following the science and the San Diego County Health Department's online dashboard, the number of COVID-19 cases and positive tests have jumped significantly in the 3 zip code area that covers South Bay Union neighborhoods. In fact, the district is currently in the high transmission red tier. Eddie Montalvo has taught his 6-year-old daughter Mia why masks matter.
I'm not against it. I'm not for it. But if it's going to protect my kids from whatever it is that's out there, I'm all for it.
Superintendent Jose Espinosa is not giving media interviews, but he did provide KPBS with this written statement that says, in part, we know that there are 2 sides to this debate and that people feel very strongly about their position. As a school district, it is not our role to participate in this debate. Our goal was and remains to be transparent in our decision-making process and to use data provided by public health agencies to make all decisions. The South Bay Union School District is not alone in the uptick in COVID cases. In the past week, almost 8,900 new COVID cases have been reported to the county. That's an increase of 26% from the week before. We'll get a new update from the county tomorrow.
Sometimes it's kind of uncomfortable. For example, when I have to do like outside activities because sometimes I can't breathe.
Beatrice Vargas wears a mask to pick up her niece from school. She wishes COVID was over.
You go to the gym and you don't even have a mask, or like the bus. Sometimes I don't even have it on, but I saw everybody with the mask, so I put it on.
The South Bay Union District officials have hope that by August, COVID numbers will drop so low, students will once again have the option of whether they wear a mask. MG Perez, KPBS News.
And we have some breaking news. California state lawmakers have just announced a budget agreement that offers cash payments as inflation relief. Under the plan, single filing taxpayers making up to $125,000 and joint filers making up to $250,000 would be eligible for payments of $200 per person. A family of 5 would receive a $1,000 rebate. The budget agreement also expands California earned income tax credits and provides $1.3 billion in relief for small businesses and nonprofits. There's no word yet if Governor Newsom will sign off on the plan. Righting the wrongs of the past. That is the focus of the first report from California's Reparations Task Force released today. KPBS Speak City Heights reporter Jacob Ayer goes inside the 500-page report and its recommendations.
Support of slavery, segregation, and racial terror are just some of the harms perpetuated by the state, according to California's first-in-the-nation task force on reparations for African Americans. The report calls for action to address those wrongs. Task Force Chair Camila Moore says the recommendations include expanded voter registration, making it easier to hold accountable, and improving black neighborhoods.
In this first report, we're really just documenting the harms against the African American community. But in terms of compensation, we still have to have conversations about that. And the compensation aspect of this program will be in our second report.
The task force voted in March to limit reparations to descendants of U.S. slaves or descendants of a free black person living in the U.S. prior to the end of the 19th century. It does not include compensation to all black people in California. San Diego City Councilwoman Monica Montgomery Stepp is one of 9 members across the state on the Reparations Task Force. She told KPBS in a written statement, "The task force has made it clear that reparations for African Americans are critical for rectifying systemic disenfranchisement. This interim report begins to lay the foundation for providing a proposal to the California legislature and serves as an example for the federal government to follow." Moore says the report is the first government-commissioned study focused on addressing the unique needs of the African American community since the 1968 Kerner Commission. She says a key recommendation includes a special office with experts in genealogy to help people document their eligibility for financial restitution.
To assist the African American community with demonstrating their eligibility, because I think the task force understands that the burden shouldn't be on the individual, it should really be on the state.
The report marks the halfway point for the 2-year task force's work. The draft report does not provide a comprehensive reparations plan, which is due to lawmakers before July 1st, 2023. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
As families in Uvalde, Texas begin laying their loved ones to rest, many questions still remain about the deadly Robb Elementary School shooting. Reporter Gloria Pazmino with an update on what went wrong.
I just told my class, get on the ground, get to the corner.
Harrowing details of survival and questions. Days after a gunman entered the Robb Elementary School and opened fire inside 2 adjoining classrooms, killing 19 children and 2 teachers in Uvalde, Texas, contradictions and shifting narratives continue to emerge about law enforcement's response. Pedro Arredondo, the Uvalde School's police chief who led the flawed law enforcement response, seen here for the first time. According to the Department of Public Safety, Arredondo has not responded to a request for a follow-up interview with the Texas Rangers. Arredondo will only say they are talking.
I've been on the phone with them every day.
And DPS now saying the door the shooter used to enter the school was closed but not locked. That's a change from last week, when the department first said the door had been propped open by a teacher. While victims and survivors demand answers, families mourn.
I believe that Alithia would want us to be strong and that she's in a better place.
Funeral services will be held Wednesday for 10-year-old Jose Flores Jr. and Irma Garcia, one of the teachers who was killed, and her husband, who died from a heart attack days later. Visitation and rosary services will be held for Naivea Bravo, Jace Luevanos, and Jayla Nicole Silguero. All of them 10 years old. Gloria Pazmino, KPBS News.
Water districts in East County today broke ground on a water recycling plant that they say will provide 11.5 million gallons a day of purified waste water. KPBS Science and Technology reporter Thomas Fudge has more.
People wearing business suits and hard hats broke ground in Santee for the East County Advanced Water Purification Plant. It's part of a plan by 4 East County water agencies to take wastewater that's now treated and dumped in the ocean and turn it into water that's clean enough to drink.
This project will create 30% of our water supply needs. It'll be sourced locally. It will not be imported from hundreds of miles away from the Colorado River Basin that is under stress, or from the Delta in Northern California. So it's significant from that standpoint. It's a local, reliable supply of water.
Water purification plants force wastewater through very fine filters. Any remaining contaminants are blasted with UV light and mixed with hydrogen peroxide. The plants are expensive. The one in East County will cost $950 million. 4 years ago, a Padre Dam Water District engineer told KPBS the estimated cost was around $460 million. But outgoing general manager of the Padre Dam District, Alan Carlisle, says things have changed.
The project has evolved. It's expanded. We've added energy recovery. We've increased the size of the project, and then of course the impacts of the worldwide pandemic, supply chain issues, inflation. Those have all impacted the price.
But Carlisle says there will be savings on the cost of imported water.
In other words, if we do nothing, what are we going to pay for water? And what are we going to pay for wastewater services compared to what those services will cost if we do this project?
In San Diego County, Oceanside already has made purified wastewater a part of its water supply, and a much bigger project is being planned for the city of San Diego. Devin Upadhyay is Assistant General Manager of the LA-based Metropolitan Water District. He says the East County Water Project is central to their regional goals.
We provide about half of the water that's used in Southern California, but as we've seen climate conditions change and we've seen growth patterns in the region, our board has taken a position that we need to increase self-reliance on local supplies that are developed here within the region to reduce strain on imported supplies.
Metropolitan is offering a financial incentive to East County that could cover $92 million of the cost of the plant. The vast majority of the cost, $800 million, will be covered by loans from the state and the federal government, with interest rates as low as 1%. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
And while we're in this drought, the lack of rain is not helping matters when it comes to the long, hot summer months. Today, fire officials gave our John Carroll an update on how they're working hard to prevent, to respond, and to help people recover from the destructive flames.
As climate change continues to alter our weather, CAL FIRE came to the conclusion some time ago that the concept of wildfire season was out of date. This one is burning right now in Napa. It's grown to nearly 600 acres with only 5% containment, and structures are threatened.
We know that last year's fire season was the worst in our state's history. And sadly, it's not an outlier. I think we said the same the year before that and the same the year before that.
In a webinar Wednesday, Senator Alex Padilla and other state and federal officials provided an update on what government is doing about wildfires, trying to keep them from happening, making sure the resources are in place when they do, and helping Californians recover.
Shoring up our electrical infrastructure is a key strategy for mitigating fire risk.
And we are investing heavily in pre-event planning, mitigation, and preparedness across the state to build resilient communities.
But even with the best prevention efforts, wildfires will happen. Mark Ghilarducci says the state is using federal funds through the infrastructure bill, along with money from California's coffers, to respond as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Cal OES is also working closely with our local government fire and emergency management agencies to ensure there's a close coordination across all jurisdictions.
After a fire has done its damage and before they can even think about rebuilding, many Californians face further challenges posed by flooding and debris flows. Senator Padilla says he's introduced legislation to help.
The Fire Suppression Improvement Act and the Post-Fire Flood and Debris Flow Act will help us meet the growing threat of natural disaster from initial ignition to post-fire recovery.
The EPA is also working with the state to set up clean air centers for populations particularly vulnerable to harmful wildfire smoke, a multifaceted approach to wildfires that last year burned more than 2.5 million acres in California and destroyed or damaged more than 3,500 structures. John Carroll, KPBS News.
California Attorney General Robb made a stop in San Diego today to discuss women's reproductive rights. Bonta issued a consumer alert regarding what he calls crisis pregnancy centers. He says they're often misleading about services that are provided, and that he says prepare to prosecute those who break the rules.
We're going to continue to use the full force of the law and the full authority of my office to defend your rights. And I guarantee you that those who attempt to get in the way of this, those who attempt to illegally mislead or circumvent the law, they will face consequences.
Bunta says these facilities often present themselves as abortion clinics and that they don't even offer birth control and are not licensed. He urged women to do their research and if they've been a victim to contact his office. During the COVID pandemic, many child care providers had to at least temporarily close their doors. KPBS investigative reporter Claire Chegasser says even temporary closures were enough to push some over the brink.
Carolina Festo walks over the cracked concrete outside her home in San Diego's City Heights neighborhood and envisions something entirely different, a play space for kids.
So I want to put you see, to put is very difficult, and I want to put the better one, that way the kids can be safe. And as you can see, I need a lot of work, but I cannot afford it. I don't have money to do that.
Festo is a refugee from Burundi who used to run a home child care with 12 kids. When COVID started, she had to close. All her clients were refugees who worked in hotel housekeeping, and they were laid off.
I lost my clients because the parents, they didn't go to work, so they decided to stay with the kids. So I lost my job that way.
Festo's childcare was one of almost 4,000 that closed in California after COVID hit. During the pandemic, the rate of childcare closures nearly tripled, on average almost 5 a day. And many of those businesses, like Festo's, have not been able to reopen.
It was very tough and very difficult for me to come back in business because, as I was saying, a lot of clients moved out of San Diego.
In many places, closures hit the most vulnerable neighborhoods the hardest. And while there was some government aid for childcare, it didn't do enough. Festo says with more money, she'd be able to build an extra room and care for kids whose parents work night shifts.
So my plan, I wanted to put one more room upstairs.
And a lot of them just couldn't make it. They didn't have a savings account they could rely on.
Kim McDougall runs the Child Care Resource Service for the San Diego YMCA. She says even a small disruption is enough to put child care providers out of business, especially in lower income areas.
Many of our higher income communities were able to maintain their child care supply. And that's probably because they're able to charge a higher price for the care that they're providing.
And those businesses likely had a safety net. She says during COVID, the country lost about 9% of its childcare supply, and there was already a big deficit.
Lisa, happy? Yeah. What do you think?
Ariana Steck sits at a desk in her small apartment with 4 different baby contraptions, all within arm's reach. Right now, her 6-month-old son, Griffin, is standing in a jumper surrounded by colorful buttons that play music.
I started using a family childcare home, a licensed family childcare home, for 1 day a week. And the rest of the days, I am childcare and employee.
Steck has been back at work for a month. While she put Griffin on childcare waitlists long before he was actually born, she hasn't been able to find full-time care.
Many centers didn't have vacancies until the winter of 2022. One center told me they had over 100 infants on their wait list. I was like, well, he's going to be, in preschool by the time you call us.
So she's attempting to work from home while caring for a baby.
So my very first week back, I started my days at about 4 in the morning, and he slept until 7, so I got 3 hours in then.
That wasn't sustainable. Now she gets a little more sleep and tries to work while Griffin plays.
Like tummy time, in his bedroom we have a little footstool that I use for the rocker. I park my laptop on that and he's sitting right next to me.
Steck actually works in part doing childcare referrals, so she has better access to childcare than almost anyone. And when she was pregnant, she knew there was a childcare crisis.
But once you're sitting in it, you're like, oh, this is a crisis. There is a legitimate thing happening here where there is a huge demand for infant care and the supply is just not there.
She says if she didn't have a flexible employer, she'd have to quit her job. Claire Chegasser, KPBS News.
Gas prices are climbing even higher, reaching new records nationally and here in San Diego County. The national average for regular gasoline jumped 5 cents today to $4.67 a gallon. Of course, prices are much higher in California. Our local average jumped 3.3 cents to $6.11 a gallon. Soaring gas prices are led in part by strong demand as people ramp up travel plans. The jump also comes after the European Union reached a deal to ban 90% of its Russian oil imports by the end of the year. Millions of people are now under new dramatic water restrictions in Southern California. Starting today, some people in the LA area are now limited to watering their lawns just 1 day a week. Stephanie Elam reports.
With no rainfall and record high temperatures exacerbating the already dry conditions, the Southwest megadrought is intensifying. 11% of California is now in exceptional drought, the worst designation according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. Add to that Lake Mead, the nation's largest reservoir, which keeps draining to unprecedented lows. From human bones to old boats.
See if it'll start.
The precipitous fall is revealing secrets long hidden underwater.
There's probably 2 V8 engines under the mud.
For the first time, Lake Mead, which supplies water to millions of people in the West, has fallen to a level that may force the federal government to institute a second tier of unprecedented water restrictions, following the first round of cuts in January. Officials now say it's likely to drop another 12 feet by this fall. By September 2023, the government expects the lake will only be 19% full. For the Southwest, that could mean the most severe level of water cuts.
We're falling about a foot a week right now because of the agricultural demands downstream.
California is one of those states that relies on water from Lake Mead. Its 2 largest reservoirs, Shasta Lake and Lake Oroville, are at critically low levels, at just half of their historical averages.
We are doing what we had signaled was likely to happen.
For months, Governor Gavin Newsom has called on residents and businesses to voluntarily cut their water usage by 15%. But in March, urban water usage rose by 19% from the same month in 2020, spurring Newsom to pressure the state's largest urban water suppliers to beef up their water conservation efforts or potentially face a significant reduction in water use statewide this summer. In response, municipalities and agencies are taking action. The State Water Resources Control Board voted to ban watering any ornamental turf at commercial sites. In Los Angeles, outdoor watering is only allowed 2 days a week. In the Bay Area, at least 2 water districts are enforcing excessive water usage with fines. The East Bay Municipal Utility District is also prepared to release the names of customers who excessively violate the mandatory restrictions. All this, and it's not even summer yet.
Here's a look at our weather headlines, and our warm weather will be with us right through Thursday. And then we'll start to cool it off a little bit Friday into the weekend before the next warm-up comes early next week. And as that cooler air comes in, our June gloom returns. Those coastal low clouds will start to penetrate deeper into the inland valleys on Friday. As we go to the water vapor loop, well, that yellow represents dry. We have a ridge of high pressure overhead, but this is the trough off to the west, and that will be approaching, and that will bring us a little bit of cooling. Here's our upper flow, indicative of the trough coming on in for the end of the weekend as we start off the weekend. But notice what happens here. You'll see a building ridge right there, and that will bring back the warming early next week. Looking at our forecast for tonight, well, the clouds come rolling in. 63 is the forecast low in San Diego. Borrego Springs, 71, a mild night. Over here in Mount Laguna, 61. El Cajon at 58, Oceanside 59. Well, another quiet day here on Thursday. Morning clouds giving way to afternoon sunshine, and the temperatures should be nice and comfortable. Right here along the coast, close to average temperatures. Inland sections running about 5 degrees or so above average. Ramona at 87. Borrego Springs nice and hot, 103 degrees. And as we take you into Friday's weather, well, the trough is moving through. It's very weak, but it will help to bring those low clouds a little bit farther into the interior valley. So we'll start off with some clouds. Notice the temperatures drop off a little bit into the weekend, and then starting to see some hints of some milder air early next week. Inland sections, more clouds into Friday morning, afternoon sun, then a little cooler over the weekend. As we head our way to the mountains, you can see the temperatures cooling down, and then into the deserts. Well, it stays hot, just not quite as hot over the weekend. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
President Biden commemorated the historic swearing-in of Admiral Linda Fagan to lead the U.S. Coast Guard.
More qualified to lead the proud women and men of the Coast Guard, and she will also be the first woman to serve as Commandant of the Coast Guard, the first woman to lead any branch of the United States Armed Forces, and it's about time.
Fagan has 36 years of Coast Guard service and has served on all 7 continents. As the Coast Guard's Vice Commandant, she was the service's first female 4-star admiral. Biden said we need to see more women at the highest level of command across all of the armed forces. Many of us know this already, but a new survey found San Diego is one of the best cities in the U.S. when it comes to raising a family. America's finest city came in 6th, thanks to excellent opportunities for education, for health, childcare, and family fun. It did, however, get low marks on affordability. No surprise there. Chula Vista came in at number 37 on the Wallet Hub survey. Oceanside took the number 63 spot. Coming in number 1 was Fremont in Northern California. More than 180 cities were compared in 46 key metrics. Wallet Hub said it did the study to give families who need to move a sense of their options across the country. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.